We are recording, as far as I can tell.
Okay. So ready for the
Absolutely.
intro? Okay.
So this is the Patchwork Podcast, episode 2. And we're going to talk about the conundrum that is the cinematic experience of Love Actually.
I feel it in my fingers, I feel it in my toes.
That's right, Jamie. And you know, we waited a long time. It's been a movie I've been encouraging you to watch, and it's been definitely a testament to our friendship that you took that risk, you took that ability. You based on my input, you did watch it. And I maybe I'm going on a limb here, but I think you may have an opinion or two about the movie.
About Love Actually?
Love Actually, this 2003, according to Wikipedia, Christmas romantic comedy. So I'd like you to know, is it a comedy?
So, I mean, if I was to categorize Love Actually, the experience of watching it, first of all, it's worth pointing out that after I watched it, I did actually go look online. It's quite the controversial movie, with a lot of people thinking it's a great specimen of its kind, and a lot of other people thinking that it's pure dreck. And if I was,
and you were in the middle, right? You were just no strong opinions about it, right?
More along the pure dreck.
Okay.
That doesn't mean it's not mysterious. It doesn't mean it's not worth watching. But if I was to categorize movies, like, you have really bad movies with bad budgets and no sort of technical capability or prowess.
Technically
so Ed Wood's movies, Plan 9 from Outer Space, where you can see the curtains and all that kind of stuff. It's not that Alien movies didn't make money, or that nobody was interested in sci-fi. It's just that Ed Wood's sort of horror, sci-fi, generic, terrible writing and awful production makes those movies truly bad, and they're actually worth watching because they're so bad, right? Just so awful. And then there's bad movies with a lot of budget, right? There's lots of those.
Made by professionals. There's lots of them. I mean, all you have to do is go to Rotten Tomatoes and look for any Hollywood production that clocks percent sort of rotten, and it'd probably be a pretty crappy movie. And I could go way out on a limb here and talk about Marvel movies and where they fit in these categories. A little bit there, you get into sort of the idea of Elvis movies or Star Trek movies, and that kind of subgenre. It's maybe different.
Elvis movies.
A different.
Well,
thing.
I mean, Marvel movies though are all the rage, though, right? I mean, my problem with them is definitely not their technical production, and it's not even the writing, because the writing's pretty sharp, and it's certainly not the acting. It's that there's absolutely no human figure to empathize with. So to me, I'm on the Scorsese side of this thing. I mean, they are spectacles, they're roller coaster rides, professionally and perfectly executed, but depth of human conflict, I mean, not so much, right? Because, as soon as you have a superpower, you are no longer sort of empathetic.
I think you could make an argument that Tony Stark is maybe that character is an exception, but
yeah, and you can make the same argument about Batman, except these guys are multi-billionaires with unobtainium technology, right? I think I read once that somebody did an analysis of Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight. There's great movies, by the way.
Yes.
And they said he lasted about 3 weeks doing the stuff he did without seriously hurting himself physically, maybe make it out of his 20s alive, but definitely not his 30s. Like, you just can't do that stuff, right, and survive. So even that is kind of a little bit, it's not human enough, right? Even given Jackie Chan levels of pain tolerance, acrobatics, athleticism, etc., you hit 40 and there's no more Batman. That's not going to happen. And Tony Stark, well, I mean, would that iron suit have got him out of Afghanistan? I don't know. It's stretching the cords of belief. Anyway, then there's good movies with no budget. There's lots of good movies with no budget, right? Or low budget, or things that have become good and done on a relative shoestring. Halloween, for instance, great movie, classic of its kind. John Carpenter didn't have much budget. The other one I think of is Robert Rodriguez and El Mariachi, which became Desperado. He did that on his credit cards in Mexico, right? They're great movies. They're really well put together, well written, inventive, and they're often a testimony to the personal genius of the person, working with whatever they've got to get it through. Anyway. And then there's good movies with lots of great budget, and we don't have to talk about them. And then there's Love Actually, which, for all that preamble, comes in a really weird space. The guy who wrote Love Actually, famous writer, has written almost all of the hits of the genre, going back to Four Weddings and a Funeral. Is that it?
That was maybe the original of the genre.
Of the genre, right? Although it's not Christmas. It's definitely just a romantic comedy that could be bleak, but really isn't.
But I think it's always Christmas in the world of Four Weddings and a Funeral.
Well, we're going to get into that because I don't see anything particularly Christmassy about Love Actually. But anyway, and it's got this huge budget and an amazing cast, right? Like the cast in that movie is absolutely astonishing. And I had never seen it or really even heard about it because I hated Four Weddings and a Funeral and Notting Hill. And I think those are the only two I saw before I said, nah, not going to watch these. Didn't watch Bridget Jones' Diary. Didn't watch, are there others?
I know, from that genre, that sort of set in the UK.
Well, I guess they are set in the UK, aren't they?
That's part of the definition of the genre, of that
and I guess
particular genre.
That sort of puts them slightly above the Hallmark, Christmas episodes that get rolled out in America.
Because obviously all the characters are really smart because they have British accents.
I mean, I'm not sure about that, but it certainly is the case if you're an Anglophile, these things are your bread and butter, especially if you're not in England. And that's not true either. I think I can't really put my finger on that genre. I mean, they're romantic comedies, but I like a romantic comedy. I mean, what's the closest American version?
Groundhog Day?
No. Groundhog Day is a different movie entirely. And I wouldn't even put it in the category of romantic comedy. It is a comedy and there's a romance, but Groundhog Day is a different thing. It's a more Borgesian sort of nightmare, really. It's a nightmare thing. It's a comedic horror story. No, I'm thinking of Pretty Woman.
Okay.
Right.
That is sort of archetypal
American rom-com. Yeah. And it's hard to distinguish between a rom-com and a romance. The Princess Bride is a romance.
Yes.
It's also a kid's story, but it's also a genius movie, right? Because, the people who made it are really, really good. Rob Reiner actually directed that one. So it's tough for me. Watching Love Actually, it got worse and worse and worse and worse until I couldn't believe what I was actually watching. I mean, it really is. It's a really, truly horrifically bad movie with a ton of budget and a ton of people in it.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're surprised, you're saying as the cast sort of showed up in the various vignettes, you were surprised. You didn't know everybody who's in the cast.
I mean, I think you had mentioned that Hugh Grant was in it because your interest in him being the prime minister and which party is he actually representing.
We will get to that. We need a solid 5 minutes on that topic.
No problem. The key thing is I could not believe the cast as it rolled out. I could not believe how many people, how many A-list actors and actresses, actors, whatever, were in this movie. It was hard for me to believe, Mark. They all rolled out. And the stories...
And yet you found it atrocious. You found it difficult to finish.
Okay, you know me. I'm an optimist. I am a romantic.
You're romantic. And I have to say this, I'm not trying to butter you up, but you have great taste. You have fantastic taste.
And less filling. No. Anyway, but I am a romantic. Like I'm a kind of optimistic,
absolutely,
love is everywhere kind of guy. Absolutely. And I found this thing.
You're not a cynic. You're not a cynic.
I am not, and I found this thing just appalling on so many levels. Story levels mainly.
Yes.
I mean, the stories, without exception, stretch the realm of credibility again. Right? It's almost like these are Marvel superheroes in some way, right? They all have a superhero. Like Liam Neeson can get over the death of his wife in an instant, Hugh Grant can dance and sing his way into some staffer's arms by finding her on, is it Christmas Eve? Is it? No.
I think it's a bit confusing. All this stuff happens. There's an implication it's Christmas Eve, but why would they be doing the Christmas pageant at the school on Christmas
Eve? No.
But then just a suspension of disbelief.
Ish.
Yes.
It's so funny because it's so counter to the tradition of British movies in the late 20th century and early 21st century, where they're pretty much grounded in a kind of social realism, right? They're a little grittier, a little less fantastic.
Although I'd say there's a strain of sentimentality. Even something like Trainspotting, which is a pretty gritty movie, is extraordinarily sentimental in a very British way. Even though it's set in Scotland, but in a very UK way, it's extremely sentimental. And I think maybe part of your distaste for Love Actually is that sentimentality, which is absolutely like full force in Love Actually.
You know what? I'm all for sentiment, and in fact, I am a sentimental guy. I think it's the manipulation. I think it's the fake sentiment that I really don't like. And I'm not Mr. Authentic when it comes to these things either. But the sort of crappy writing combined with the ridiculous plots combined with the I'm not P.T. Anderson, but I'm going to try and take 10 characters and weave their stories together for you, combined with the ersatz Christmasness of the whole thing, which it is really I just hate, combined with the if you don't like this, you don't like love sort of underscoring.
Now, do you think that came from the movie or from the fans? Because you mentioned that there's online.
Yeah.
There's a strong feeling there. Do you see some of the debate there saying, look, if you're a Grinch, if you don't love this movie, you're a Grinch?
Well, so I thought the miracle of the movie was that some casting agent got all these people to show up, right? And by all these people, we mean, Liam Neeson and
Rowan Atkinson.
Rowan Atkinson, yeah, and
Hugh Grant,
and
Laura Linney,
and Emma Thompson,
yes,
and Alan Rickman,
yes,
right, and a host of Playboy bunnies and models and actresses, and the guy who played Watson in Sherlock, and in
Morgan
The Office.
Freeman.
No, not Morgan Freeman. There's an edit right there. No, what's his name? Martin Freeman.
Yeah.
Morgan Freeman. Yeah, Martin Freeman. Right? Oh, that is a pretty powerhouse cast.
Yes.
Even for the time. I thought that was the miracle of Love Actually, right there.
Is getting a cast like, and all the characters were, with a few exceptions, were recognizable A-list actors.
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely they were. And then I read why. It's because of this producer who did the whole thing, right? And he's the guy behind 4 Weddings and a Funeral and a whole ton of other movies of that ilk, and everybody likes him. So they all showed up, and they all could, as you've pointed out before, they could all just show up and do their little bit and then vanish. It's not like a regular shoot where you're on set for a year.
And it wasn't Los Angeles, it was London. So, and almost all the actors were British, so presumably they'd be there for Christmas to be with their families, unless they came in and decided their families were too much and they left and went to Portugal. But that's another.
Right, Colin Firth. We forgot Colin Firth, right? Holy crap, man! And what's worse is, of course, I'm not sure they shot it at Christmas time. So whether or not they were there for their Christmas.
But Christmas movies aren't shot at Christmas time. There's a long tradition. You mentioned the Hallmark movies, which are all shot in BC in August. But that's also part of the charm.
I mean, sure. I mean, I find them charmless. But honestly, it was really hard for me to believe what I was seeing.
But you did what? You were able to get through to the end.
I did, yeah.
Okay, well, kudos to you.
Well,
I think that's and I appreciate that, because I can understand why I am a bit of a fan, or at least I see the value in the movie. I can definitely see why. That's why I was very interested in your reactions. I thought you were gonna hate this. I deeply, deeply despise this. So I'm kudos to you for getting through to the end.
Oh, I got through to the end. I'll watch anything, pretty much.
Did you have to oxygen bottles or anything too?
No, it wasn't But we watched it together and we looked at each other afterwards, and I'm like, what did we just see? I mean, this is really, I can't believe this movie was ever made. I can't believe any studio would greenlight a script so bad. So I went in and I thought, okay, I'm going to watch this.
Yes.
And it's got Liam Neeson, great actor.
Now, have you seen the online reaction?
No,
before?
I had not.
Oh, so you went in with open eyes?
Totally cold. And I thought, this is going to be great. Oh, there's Alan Rickman and Emma Thompson. They've got something going on. He's being tempted by some nameless actress in the office. But, Liam Neeson's just lost his wife and he's got a young son and it's Christmas time. How's that going to play out? Oh, it's a romance because the kid doesn't care that his mother's dead. And neither does, his dad, because he's going to find Claudia Schiffer at the end anyway at the freaking school concert that takes place on Christmas Eve or whatever, right? Abominable. I would give that a C- grade for anybody who even pitched that story as a Christmas story. But if they had played it out the whole way, maybe over 2 hours,
just that thread, that could have been interesting. The only honest moment, kudos to Emma Thompson for putting up with that script. That's the only honest moment in that entire movie is when she gets her reaction to the CD instead of the thing she knows he bought, the ring or whatever it was. I can't remember. Necklace, whatever, for his mistress. That's the only honest moment in that entire movie. So the Bob Dylan signs on the porch, whatever. It's not the porch. I guess it would be
terrible.
The front parlor, whatever.
Just terrible.
But you have to admit, iconic.
It was iconic when Bob Dylan did it. It wasn't iconic when it showed up in this horrible movie. Nobody knows who Bob Dylan is. Yeah, poet. Yes, Nobel Prize winning poet Bob Dylan. Nobel Prize in literature, no less. Which,
But nobody knows that particular film clip. People would react.
Of course they do. It would have been copied a million times, right? I think I saw like 50, second string bands who used that same card thing.
That would be interesting to see since 2003, because that meme or that image of people voicelessly showing like text on cards,
right,
is pretty common. How much of that actually is harkening back to the Bob Dylan film clip versus
Love Actually? No.
Is it derivative? Absolutely. Is it a completely cheesy scene? It's terrible. It's terrible in the levels of terribleness keep going down. But I do think that it set there are memes and there's resonance in popular culture that now it's 20 years later that the movie still has. So I think it isn't a movie without impact.
Yeah, you asked me whether it should be considered a Christmas classic. And I think I came down and said, absolutely. Well, I didn't know at the time. Yes. But yeah, absolutely not. There's nothing salvageable in that movie. I don't think there's anything worth saving. If I had a hard drive with limited capacity to save all the films of the Western world, it wouldn't make the cut. Not even close.
Okay.
Maybe for Hugh Grant's Dance, I might actually take that. This is what Love Actually boils down to.
Now you're picking. That's, if I may, you're cherry picking some of the worst. Like that is absolutely terrible. That is so bad.
It's no worse. It's no worse than Liam Neeson seeing Claudia Schiffer, as a mom. It's no worse than January Jones coming in and having a threesome with that guy at the end.
That's terrible.
It's no worse than Alan Rickman showing back up, because his family isn't destroyed. And why did he make that choice anyway? Like, he wasn't going to make that choice anyway. If they had done just that one thing, again, it could have been a good movie. You know what this reminded me of? It reminded me of a script writer's notebook with a bunch of half-assed ideas for rom-coms. And he goes, I'm going to put them all together. I'm going to be Robert Altman or P.T. Anderson. And, dude, you're not Robert Altman or P.T. Anderson, right? He didn't have the skill, didn't have the writing skill. And you know what? It's shot so beautifully, too. There's some beautiful shots.
There's some great scenes.
Great scenes of London. London is the star
London
there.
Is the star, yeah. I'd say that. Of all those stars, the city is the actual star. So I think you're saying this is, ultimately, it's not only a bad movie, but it is forgettable. It is something that any cultural resonance it has will be lost in 10 years. Nobody's going to remember. And that is a truly deep condemnation, because people love it or hate it, people will have a reaction. But I think what you're saying is it's not worthy of a reaction.
I mean, I would say 50 years from now, it's not going to have any play whatsoever. Right? None. I mean, that's a tough thing for anything so mired in modernity as that thing. But I really don't think it has any legs.
Okay.
I mean, it is a huge phenomenon still. People still watch it every year. They love it, right? It's like that Pogue's Christmas Carol, like when
And I will not defend that. I'm a fan of the band, but that particular song is...
I know, but I went online afterwards when we were looking at those things, and I was actually doing some post on the podcast, and people love that thing. They love it. They think it's the best, only true Christmas Carol ever written, and I'm like,
because
sure thing. Anyway, yeah. So
your general sense is that it really, and I think it's a fair assessment. It's a harsh assessment, but it's a fair assessment for sure.
Look, the best thing about it, I said, is the cinematography and the hints at what that movie could be. The worst thing about it, I don't know. The worst thing about it is everything. It's just really badly put together.
So it sounds like the writing is you'd see as being sort of the key flaw, and also just not having the skill to put together that kind of a challenge of having. And I think you said 7. I think maybe there are more plot lines.
There might even be more. Yeah.
So just getting that to work.
Yeah. The problem is it's not challenging. It's not a challenging watch.
I think this is where I'm going to. I'm not going to argue it's a good movie, but I do think it does have some elements of challenge in it. So there's the class. So anything about the UK, there's going to be a class aspect to it. And if you look at all of the plot threads, most of the people are quite comfortable. There are some exceptions. So the Prime Minister's assistant is, she's working class. But just about everybody else is solidly middle class or more, has money.
Yep.
So there's that aspect of it. There's so there's this idea, is this an actual depiction? Is this a fantasy version of Tony Blair's Britain, or is it a and that's where I think this is where the interest comes in. This is where you can have some more kind of critique. Is it like a new Labour fantasy? And it's 2003, so it's a time of the
right. So who is he supposed to be? Who is Hugh Grant supposed to be? He's supposed to be a Labour Prime Minister.
So there. Thank you. I was waiting for that lob ball.
There it is.
So no, he's a Tory. He's absolutely a Tory, and so part of it is just his general attitude. The other part of it is he mentions when he goes to his assistant's house, and all kinds of creep there, like major creepiness that he is.
Using the eye of the state to
the staff. Yes, he's the Prime Minister, and there's somebody who's on staff, and he's putting her in this situation. Completely unacceptable. But he goes to her family's home, and he apologizes, saying that the last lot made a mess of it. So what he's referring to there, while it isn't, I believe, a new Labour fantasy, that is a little dig at Tony Blair and company. So that establishes that he's in a different party. He is his reaction to Margaret Thatcher. Some people have said his reaction to Margaret Thatcher is maybe a clue. I don't think it's a clue at all. It's Margaret Thatcher as a woman, not as a political person. Where he said he's looking at the prime. He says, something. He sees a picture of Margaret Thatcher and says, how do you deal with your romantic thing? Anyway.
Okay.
That is a red herring. That's a red herring.
It went right over my head.
Well, that's okay because it was a red herring. But he's a Tory. He's a Conservative Prime Minister. A one nation Tory, not a Thatcherite, sort of a John Major light. Yeah. But he's a Tory. Absolutely.
I don't know. I can see the opposite. I can see that he's agitprop for the Labour Party, for new ideas, for hip younger third way socialism.
Could be,
right?
Could be. But then you look at at least the history of post-war Britain. The only bachelor prime minister was a Tory, Ted Heath.
Well, okay. I don't think I really doubt the writer of this trek was going into who was a bachelor and who wasn't, because honestly he couldn't even get his mind around whether somebody would be like super melancholy after your partner dies at Christmas.
The emotion, there's zero emotional depth. But there's another political question which you and I have talked about in the green room. Billy Bob Thornton. We didn't even mention Billy Bob Thornton.
Oh, we did not.
So he arrives as the American president.
Yeah.
And in a typical kind of, you mentioned this as a big budget movie.
Yep.
But, God bless British filmmakers, but they just cannot get it together that an American president doesn't show up in a crap Crown Vic. He shows up in this limousine you and I wouldn't show up to a prom in. And he shows up at number 10 Downing Street in this totally crap. You know what? Because they can't be bothered. They can't be bothered to get like the kind of thing an American president would show up in. Anyway, Billy Bob Thornton shows up. And the real question for me, he is like the character is really terrible and very, in the 2 minutes he's on screen, seen as being terrible.
Yeah.
But what party would he be?
Oh, he's Republican. Absolutely. He's definitely not a Democrat.
He's a Democrat.
There's no way he's a Democrat.
He's the dark side of Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton without the charm on steroids.
No,
he's absolutely a Democrat.
No, he is a skull and bones, Princeton attending, George Bush Jr. Stand-in. Absolutely, down to the twang, down to the southernness. I know it can cut both ways, but I'm sorry.
He's
Republican through and through.
He's an amalgam of LBJ, who I have a lot of time for.
I have a lot of time.
And Clinton.
Again, this is like that guy who was the only bachelor. I don't think the writer of this thing was thinking anything. He's not LBJ. Not a chance. Not even a little bit.
But I do believe he's a Democrat. I believe that's his party.
So you believe that that the British PM is a Tory,
One Nation Tory,
and the president is a Democrat.
A Democrat, blue dog Democrat.
Yeah, and I totally disagree. I think that Hugh Grant is absolutely a stand-in for the Flash that was Tony Blair at the time, and that the awfulness. The true awfulness of George Bush Jr. That was represented by the awfulness that is Billy Bob Thornton.
Okay, so you think basically whatever, like the political political positions at the time were just replaced there.
Yep, I think so.
And you didn't mention, and maybe it's because there's so much bad in this movie, but Hugh Grant's prime minister goes on a bit of a very sad rant about how he's not. There's the press conference where they're both supposed to be like foursquare behind what Billy Bob Thornton wants, and Hugh Grant's prime minister stands up. Not like the poodle Tony Blair, who was accused of being a poodle. Not like that Tony Blair.
Indeed.
No, he stands up. He stands up for the
So
UK.
he is the Tony Blair corrective. I think that's exactly what it's a fantasy.
Maybe it's the new Labour fantasy there. But that whole thing was pretty rough. It was difficult to listen to.
The worst of it was that it was motivated not by anything that he actually believed, but by the fact that the president had groped his not to be had yet girlfriend, right?
Yes.
Which is like, that is the worst. It's like, dude, you have the worst motives ever, right?
There we go. We go. Yes.
But that's the writing. The writing mixes up sentiment with random bullshit.
Yeah.
And it mixes up Christmas, which it ostensibly is, especially with the pop star story. We haven't even got to that, folks.
There are layers.
There are layers. And, I like Bill Nye. He's a good actor. I mean, all these people are good actors. But I am not, how can I judge, right? I've never been handed a pile full of money and a script and said, please dance down the hallway of our number 10 set, because they're not going to let us into number 10 anyway. If somebody handed me that pile of money and that script, I'd probably do the same thing, cameras rolling or not. But I mean,
we all have to make our choices.
It's hard to believe that an actor like Liam Neeson, who at one point was going to quit the movies over the terrible paucity of ideas and writing, would actually read a script like this and go, yeah, I think I want a piece of that. It's so bad.
It's a good question. So Bill Nye. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten to that part.
No,
so
we haven't.
Are you familiar with the movie? I think it was called Strange Fruit.
I have not. No.
So it was about a band, I guess from the 70s, like a prog rock band that was on a tour, and things don't work out. And he plays a question, which I don't even know the answer to, but he's a very similar character as a musician to the character that he plays in Love Actually. So there may be a kind of continuity, or maybe that character exists in the world outside of Love Actually.
Wow. I mean, sure. And Bill Nighy's, I guess, up for an Academy Award this year for his small movie, whose name escapes me. We'll get it after the break.
He's very likable.
He's a really good actor. I loved him in Shaun of the Dead, where he's Sean's adoptive father or whatever it is, stepfather. Yeah, he's great. I really. But then I like Liam Neeson too. I like poor Alan Rickman.
There's all that talent on screen being used in unusual ways.
Sound and fury signifying nothing. That's what it is. It's something that should never have been done, honestly. And it has nothing to do with Christmas. Absolutely nothing to do with Christmas, which is also why it would never be a Christmas classic in my view.
Oh, I'd say there are something like Die Hard. So there's a movie set at Christmas, but people do make the argument that it's a Christmas classic. Uh-huh. It happens to happen around Christmas. It's not Christmassy at all, and it features.
Yeah.
Who does it feature? There's a common.
Alan Rickman.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly. So there's an overlap between those two movies.
Yeah, but overlap doth not a Christmas classic make. I mean, yes. So I mean, look, Die Hard, I get it. Okay, it's about family, really. Yeah. It's about what will this guy go through to save his wife. Again, motivation is a little bit weird because there's all those other people that would also die, and he's got it. He's a good cop. He's a good cop.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I got it. And Alan Rickman's villain, he's very good in that. Very good.
Yeah, hateable,
right? Believable, and understandable.
Yes.
Right. Very straightforward. And that's a myth. It's a little myth, it's well done and all that kind of stuff. Is it a Christmas classic?
Maybe not a Christmas classic.
People watch it at Christmas.
I'm just saying that you can have a Christmas movie where Christmas, the action takes place over Christmas. It doesn't necessarily need to be, Santa Claus as the main character.
Well, that is very true. That is true.
Or Father Christmas, as might be.
Or Father Christmas, as may be the case.
As may be the case.
All right. So have we expounded enough on Love Actually?
I think we have reached maximum Love Actually.
But we haven't even talked about the collage at the beginning and at the end that begins and ends the whole thing, or that whole airport.
Oh, the airport, yeah. Oh, the very modern reflections on 9/11.
Yeah, right?
Brutal. Although I will say that the having God Only Knows as the closing music, that's a beautiful song, and it also shows that there's a bit of a soft spot the Brits have for Brian Wilson, which is very charming. I find that very, because he's a very, very American character and very flawed. And brilliant, and they have a real affection for him, like a deep affection for him as an artist, which I find charming. So, and this is a little manifestation of that. So I found that ending of the film with that music, I actually thought, okay, you know what, respect for that. But the other Americans, there's sort of two other American characters who show up. I'm sorry, there's so much.
We're way over, yeah.
So
it's okay.
Do you want to take a break?
No, go.
Okay, so there are two American characters who show up. Which one of the things I like is they're just there. There's no, I just got here from the States, or I'm here on a gap year.
Yep.
They're just there, and they're American.
Laura Linney,
and some other dude.
Well, plus her brother, who is
plus her brother, who
right.
Yeah. So there are three American characters, and Billy Bob Thornton. But it's great. They just show up. But the thing that's a little bit like the suspension of disbelief. Laura Linney's brother needs significant medical care.
He does.
So did they both move to the UK at the same time?
I don't know.
Or how did he end up there? Did she bring him over? And that's a bit of a
writer's notebook. Keep that in your head. It's a bunch of half-assed ideas that were never quite fleshed out.
Yeah.
That's what I guess think. And then let's call up some Playboy models and make this guy's fantasy come true. I don't know whether that was his own personal fantasy when he was a young kid.
It would be really creepy if that were the case.
Well, I mean, not really.
Okay.
You have the power to make any movie you like. You may as well. oh, it's so surprising. American women are like that. My Lord. If you haven't seen this movie, folks, absolutely, it's probably on YouTube. I would definitely kind of recommend a watch. Yeah, have some booze handy, though.
Well, Jamie, that's I think you provided a fair, balanced, and well thought out critique. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mark, for bringing it up. I never would have watched that movie without your goading. Let's put it that way. All right, that's the wrap on that one, I think. Right? Good.
I feel it in my fingers. I feel it in my toes.
Feel it in my toes, yeah.
Love is all around me,
All around
and
me.
so the fear.
I'm afraid you did it again, Bill.
It's just I know the old version so well, you know.
Well, we all do. That's why we're making the new version.